Buckle up, everybody, because today is January 16th, 2025, and it's been a wild one, so get ready for a deep dive into all the biggest stories.
It has been a bit of a whirlwind, wouldn't you say? There's a lot to unpack.
There is, and we're going to get to it all, don't you worry, but
Yeah.
we got to start with the news that has everyone glued to their screens, the will they won't they ceasefire between Israel and Hamas.
Yeah, after over a year of conflict.
Right, a deal was almost reached, and it was going to be huge, right? It would brought hostages back home, but now it seems like everything's fallen apart.
It's a very delicate situation, and it's really important to understand the background here. This conflict, it has deep roots. Decades of tension, violence between Israel and Hamas, and the ceasefire everyone was talking about, it was seen as a big step forward, a chance for peace, a chance to bring those captives home.
It wasn't just talk either. I mean, Israeli hospitals were getting ready to receive these hostages. They were setting up special units, getting resources ready for both physical and psychological care. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath, hoping for the best.
Exactly. And the fact that they were making those preparations really shows you how serious this was. These hostages, they've been through so much, and their return would be a huge victory, a humanitarian one. But with the deal in jeopardy now, that hope is sort of fading away.
It is, and we've got Prime Minister Netanyahu saying that Hamas is demanding more concessions at the last minute.
Right.
But then you've got Hamas officials saying, no, we're sticking to the agreement. So it's like this high-stakes game of who's bluffing.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to tell what's really happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, you have to remember both sides have their own story, right? Their own political goals. Figuring out what those are and what's motivating them is key to really understanding what's going on.
Yeah.
Is this a real breakdown in the talks, or is it a tactic? Something to gain an advantage, the stakes are sky high, and whatever happens could affect the whole region.
It's a powerful reminder that even now, peace can be so fragile, so hard to achieve. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that's been all over the news. A legal battle that's making headlines. The Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds lawsuit against Justin Baldoni.
Oh, yeah.
Lively accused Baldoni of harassment on a film set, and now he's countersuing for defamation.
This case has really captured the public's attention, and it raises some serious questions about, power dynamics and Hollywood accountability and the possibility of abuse in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, and it's not just gossip, right? Baldoni's lawsuit claims that Lively's accusations have hurt his reputation and his ability to work. He's saying this goes beyond personal disagreements and gets at bigger issues of fairness and due process.
Exactly. While the specifics of the case will play out in court, it does shine a light on this wider conversation about how we handle these kinds of allegations, especially in high-profile industries like Hollywood. How do we make sure that victims feel safe coming forward while also protecting the rights of the accused? It's a tricky balance, and this case will probably add fuel to that fire.
Okay, so let's move on to a couple of stories that highlight the global nature of crime and justice. The FBI just added a man from Gujarat to their 10 most wanted list. He's accused of murdering his wife back in 2015, and they're saying he's armed and dangerous, offering a reward for information leading to his arrest.
It's a reminder that violence can cross borders and that the pursuit of justice can be a long and complicated journey. This case also highlights how important it is for law enforcement agencies to cooperate internationally as they try to track down this fugitive and bring him to justice.
And then on a completely different note, in the UK, a 19-year-old neo-Nazi is facing jail time for encouraging young girls to self-harm and commit suicide online. It's a really disturbing example of how the internet can be used to exploit vulnerable people and spread dangerous ideologies.
Yeah, this case raises serious concerns about the darker side of the digital world. It highlights the need for more awareness about online safety, especially for young people. And we have to hold individuals accountable for their actions, even if those actions happen online. The impact of online manipulation can be just as damaging as a physical harm.
These two stories, while vastly different, show how crime and justice play out all over the world. Now let's head over to Europe, where there's been a troubling pattern of violence and protests. In Slovakia, an 18-year-old student was stabbed to death at a high school, just awful, sending shockwaves through the community.
That is terrible. It's a stark reminder of how vulnerable young people are and how important it is to have safe and supportive learning environments. It raises questions about security in schools and the social factors that contribute to these kinds of violent acts.
And then in London, 5 young people have been sent to prison for a brutal transphobic attack. They stabbed, punched, and kicked their victim while shouting slurs. The judge called it a hate crime and sentenced them accordingly.
This case really underscores the dangers that transgender individuals face and the urgent need to address transphobia and discrimination. The severity of the sentences sends a strong message that this kind of violence won't be tolerated, but it also shows how much work still needs to be done to create a society where everyone feels safe and respected.
And it's not just individual acts of violence. In Belgrade, a car drove into a group of anti-government protesters, injuring a young woman. These protests have been going on for weeks, fueled by anger over a building collapse that many people see as a sign of government negligence.
Right. These protests reflect a growing trend of people getting involved and demanding accountability from their leaders. Whether it's about safety regulations, social justice, or political reform, people are taking to the streets to make their voices heard and demand change. But what happened with the car shows how easily these protests can turn violent and raises concerns about the safety of those involved and the potential for things to spiral out of control.
From schools to city streets, the threat of violence seems to be everywhere. It's a sobering thought. But let's not dwell on the heavy stuff for too long. Let's look at some good news. TSMC, the world's biggest chip maker, just announced a 57% jump in profits.
Wow.
Driven by the huge demand for AI technology.
That's a big deal. It shows how fast artificial intelligence is advancing and the growing impact it's having on so many industries. TSMC's success is a testament to the power of innovation and how technology can drive economic growth.
And here's where it gets interesting. TSMC is navigating the US-China tech rivalry by building factories in both countries. It's a smart move that allows them to tap into both markets and really solidify their position as a major player in the global tech landscape.
It also highlights how technology, geopolitics, and economic power are all tangled up. As the US and China compete for dominance, and tech companies like TSMC find themselves right in the middle of this global power struggle.
Speaking of power struggles, let's jump over to Canadian politics. Prime Minister Trudeau just made a surprise announcement he won't be running for re-election. It's a huge political shakeup. And to add to the intrigue, he's prorogued Parliament until March. For those who aren't familiar with Canadian politics, that basically means hitting pause on parliamentary proceedings, leaving everyone wondering what he's going to do next.
This unexpected announcement has sparked a lot of speculation about Trudeau's motives and what it means for the Liberal Party and the entire Canadian political landscape. The prorogation of Parliament just adds to the mystery, creating a period of uncertainty and anticipation as the country waits to see what unfolds.
Yeah, it definitely throws things up in the air a bit. And speaking of unexpected things, remember that story about The Simpsons predicting a global internet outage today?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it turns out it was fake news. No sharks chewing on undersea cables this time.
Well, that's good to hear. But it does make you think about how fast misinformation can spread online, especially when it taps into those fears we have about technology.
It's a good reminder to be careful about what we see online, double check things before believing them. The internet can be amazing for sharing knowledge, but can also be a breeding ground for fake news and fear-mongering.
Definitely. On a much lighter note, let's talk about a feel-good story that's been making the rounds. An ambulance nurse in Bahrain just won a massive 71 crore in the lottery.
We're hearing he was raised by a single mother and has had his share of financial struggles, so this win couldn't have come at a better time.
It's a heartwarming story. It reminds us that even with all the craziness and negativity in the world, good things do happen. It gives you hope and makes you appreciate those little moments of joy that brighten our lives.
It's like a shot of optimism right into the system. And speaking of unexpected turns, remember that Israel-Hamas ceasefire we were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
Well, now both Biden and Trump are trying to take credit for it. It's almost funny, but also a little worrying.
Classic political opportunism. Both of them see this as a chance to score points and look good, even if it means potentially jeopardizing the peace process.
It's a little disheartening to see such a serious issue being used like a political football. It makes you question their motives. Are they really concerned about peace in the Middle East, or is this just a power play?
It's a good question, and it shows how important it is to think critically when it comes to politics. We need to be aware of the agendas at work, question the narratives being presented, and hold our leaders accountable for their actions.
So we've covered a lot today. International conflicts, legal battles, technological advancements, political maneuvering. It's been a lot to process, and it can feel overwhelming trying to make sense of it all.
It really has. It's been a day that highlights how complicated and contradictory our world is. But even with all the chaos and uncertainty, there are some key things we can learn from these events.
Definitely. So if we take a step back and look at the big picture, what themes emerge from today's news? What lessons can we take away from these seemingly unrelated events?
Well, one thing that really stands out is how interconnected our world is. From global conflicts to technological advancements, from political decisions to individual acts of violence, these events are all linked in ways that can be both profound and unsettling.
It's like a giant web, isn't it? You pull on one thread and it sends ripples throughout the whole system.
Exactly. And understanding those connections is crucial to navigating the complexities of our world. Another key theme is the importance of individual agency. Whether it is the ambulance nurse winning the lottery or the young neo-Nazi facing jail time, these stories remind us that our choices have consequences both for ourselves and for others.
It reminds us that we're not just watching things happen, but we have a role in shaping the world around us.
Right. And that leads to another important takeaway: the need for critical thinking and informed engagement. In a world bombarded with information, misinformation, and competing narratives, it's more important than ever to be discerning about the news we consume, to question what we see and hear, and to seek out different perspectives.
It's about going beyond the headlines, right? Digging deeper, connecting the dots, and forming our own informed opinions.
Exactly. And that's what we aim to do here on The Deep Dive, to provide context analysis and a critical lens to help you make sense of the world around you.
So as we wrap up our exploration of January 16th, 2025, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder. With so much going on in the world, what story, what theme, what event stuck with you the most? And why?
That's a great question. I encourage our listeners to think about that. What jumped out at you? What sparked your curiosity? What made you see the world differently?
Because ultimately, it's not just about taking in information, but engaging with it in a meaningful way. It's about connecting the dots, drawing our own conclusions, and using that knowledge to shape our understanding of the world.
Well said. And that's what makes the deep dive so valuable. It's not just a news summary. It's an invitation to think critically, to explore different viewpoints, and to engage with the world in a more informed and meaningful way.
So as you go about your day, keep those thoughts in mind. Stay curious, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions. That's how we learn, how we grow, and how we make a difference in the world.
And remember, even with all the chaos and uncertainty, there's always room for hope, for progress, and for those unexpected moments of joy that remind us that life is full of surprises. What a day, huh? So many twists and turns, highs and lows.
I know, right? We've talked about everything from a potential peace deal in the Middle East to legal drama in Hollywood, from global crime to the dangers of misinformation online. And then there's that amazing lottery win. It just goes to show you that life can throw some real curveballs.
Those unexpected moments, they really make you stop and think, don't they? They remind us that even with all the planning and predictions in the world, there's always an element of chance, of randomness that can change our lives in an instant.
For sure. And I think that's a big takeaway from today, that even though we try to analyze events and understand what's going on in the world, there's always that unknown factor, that unpredictable element that keeps us guessing.
It's that element of surprise that keeps things interesting, that makes us want to learn more.
Absolutely. As we wrap up this deep dive into January 16th, 2025, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought. We've covered a lot of complex issues today, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed by it all, by the sheer amount of information and the weight of the world's problems. But I think it's important to remember that we all have a role to play in creating the future we want to see.
I agree. It's easy to feel powerless when you look at global challenges, but the truth is every action we take, every choice we make has an impact, even if we don't see it right away.
So as you go about your day, think about what you can do to make a positive difference. It could be volunteering in your community, donating to a cause you care about, having those tough conversations with friends and family about important issues. Or maybe it's just being more mindful, more compassionate, more engaged in the world around you.
Every step we take, no matter how small, brings us closer to the world we want to live in. A world where peace is more than just a hope, where justice prevails, where technology is used for good, and where everyone has the chance to thrive.
That's a powerful vision, something we can all work towards together.
Definitely. And remember, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
Take that step today and see where it leads you. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories and insights to help you navigate this complex world we live in.
Until then, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.